extended regular to DFA. All right, so what are we doing here is you give me an extended regular expression, right? And I'm going to have a blind algorithm that just mechanically converts it over to a DFA, right? In fact, you know, what we did just a few minutes ago is we were given an NFA and we did a blind algorithm to give me a regular expression. And you might remember the guy was asking questions. Oh, well, I could convert into a better regular expression. And I was like, yeah, you might be, but I'm trying to come up with one fixed algorithm that does the conversion, right? So let's think, and what is that going to do for us? That's going to say if a regular expression can do it, then a DFA can do it, right? And that tells us that anything a regular expression can do, a DFA can do, right? So here's a regular expression, right? And what we need to do is we need to convert it into a DFA or an NFA, right? Here, I guess we're converting it into an NFA, right? So this is our task, is this is our input, and our output's going to be that, right? So how do we do it is I'm a big believer in recursion. And so what recursion is you can have as many friends as you want to help you. And a friend really is an instance of you. So what can you give your friend? You can give your friend any instance that meets the precondition, but that's smaller. And then you just trust that by magic, your friend gives you the answer. All right? So here's my big input, and I need to come up with that output. And so I'm going to get two friends, right? This regular expression you see is a union of two different things, right? So I get my friend to do the first part, and he has his friends, right? So I guess here I'm saying we're going to recurse. We're going to get a friend to do this part, and we get another friend to do that part. And I tend to not like to say your friends, but that's what we're doing in these slides. Suppose this is my input. So I ask my friend how to do this. And what does my friend do? My friend asks her friend, right? This is this weird thing inside with the star on top. So she asks her friend. And what does her friend do? Her friend is going to have four friends, right? This is the concatenation of four things together. So the first friend is give me an NFA or DFA that just the only thing it accepts is one. All right, so there, you know, if the input is one, just one, it accepts. If the input is anything else, the empty string or a two or an A, it rejects. Right? People buy that this is an NFA that accepts just one. Right? So then what about 0 star? Hey, we get another friend to tell us how to build a machine for 0 star. There it is. Look at this accepts any strings of zeros, right? 0 strings of zeros, a billion strings of zeros, and accepts nothing else. All right, so here, let's go back to this is me, right? Or I guess there are more of us. Here's one that does 1. Here's one that does 0 star again. All right, so my friend, I have 4 friends here, and they gave me these machines. And so now my task is to come up with a machine that does this, right? But that's just concatenation. We learned already if we have a machine that does L1 and L2, we can build a machine that does a concatenation for them. And the concatenation, so we're just going to concatenate all these together, right? We're going to take these answers from our friends, and we're going to concatenate them all together, right? And well, maybe I didn't do it completely like I taught you how to do it. I did a little simplification as well. But, right, so you can sort of see I've taken these 4 machines and I built this machine, right? And then, so now this guy, he returns this to that guy up there, right? So now this guy here, he asked his friend for this machine, And now what does he have to do? He takes his friend's machine and does a clingy star on it, right? And how do you do a clingy star on it? Well, you have an extra state by itself that is the accept state, and then you have an epsilon over to the start state of the other machine, and from every accept state, you have an epsilon transition back to the start state, right? So hopefully you've memorized how to go from any machine to the star of that machine, and that's what we did here, right? So now this guy is happy. He's found a machine that does this. So we go back up to this guy up here, right? And what does this guy up here do? He had one friend that does that, and now he's going to get a different friend to do this. And so he gets a different friend to do that. And what does that friend do? Well, maybe he had friends or maybe he didn't have friends, but he figures out how to build the machine that accepts AB star, right? This machine, you can see it accepts any strings of A's and B's. All right? So that's what this friend did. Now let's go back up, right? So we return this and return this to this guy. And what does this guy do? He takes the machine that his one friend gave him and his machine that his other friend gave him, and he does the union of it. And how do you do the union of it? Is you have a new state that's the start state, and there's an epsilon transition to the start state of the one machine and the start state of the other machine, right? And hence, we took this regular expression and we converted it into an NFA. Right? Does that make sense? So I can imagine saying to you on a test, right? Here's an NFA. So then, think about going to each of your friends and having your friends build the pieces and then build the pieces back up in order to get an NFA. Right? Does that make sense? So there's the whole tree, right? So I can imagine giving you this as a question, and what you need to produce is this whole tree, right? So here I'm just saying, well, each of these, quote, friends is a stack frame, right? And they're each handling them. They only handle their jobs, right? How does strong induction work? Strong induction says, suppose I want to prove that my recursive program works for every instance of every size, right? I can let Sn be the statement. Well, it works for every input of size n, right? And then S0, what is it saying? It's saying my program works for inputs of size 0, i.e., it kind of solves the base case, right? And then what does this say? This says, suppose I'm trying to prove Si, right? So I'm trying to prove that the recursive program works for every input of size I. So I'm going to say in the game, adversary, give me an arbitrary input of size I. All right, so now I have an arbitrary input of size I. What do I do with it? Well, my input of size I is going to have a number of friends. What do I know about these friends? They're all given inputs that are smaller. Well, look at all my assumptions here. I'm assuming that S0 is true and S1 is true and S2 all the way up to Si minus 1 is true. So what am I assuming there? I'm assuming that the recursive program works for any input whose size is smaller than I, right? And given that assumption, I'm going to prove, well, if it works for all of these guys, then it'll work for my input of size I, right? So that's how strong induction works. This is what the code should, yeah?
Could you give a reminder of the difference between strong and weak induction?
Yeah. Weak induction says, if I know Si minus 1, then I can get Si. Strong induction assumes it's true for everybody smaller than I.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Right. And the reason we have to assume everybody's smaller than I is because my friends might not have size I minus 1. They might have size I divided by 2. right? So this is what a recursive code looks like. I'm given some inputs. If my inputs are sufficiently small, then I'm a base case and I return the answer. Otherwise, I take my input and I build inputs for my friends. I give those inputs to my friends who give me the answer for that subinstance. And then I take my input and I build some smaller inputs for my other friend. And I give those to my other friend who gives me the answer by magic. And then I take the answers I get from my two friends and I combine them to get my answer. Does that make sense? So we are going to spend a lot of time doing this in 3101. So if you're taking it from me next term, that's what we're going to be doing. All right? So now we want to take a regular expression, which is defining a language of strings, right? Remember how we do it. What is the definition of a regular expression? Well, there's a language of strings, and it's a regular expression, right? This regular expression expresses this language, this set of strings, right? And if we have a regular expression that accepts one language and another regular expression that accepts another language, we can take the union of them and the concatenation of them and the star of them, right? And if it's an extended regular, we can do the intersection and we can do complement, right? So what is our, and we know, well, we know that they're, we have closure about all of these things, right? So anyway, I'm going to now write code, all right? You ready for code? That's going to take as input a regular expression R, and it's going to return, I guess this case, it's going to return a DFA, right? So I'm given some regular expression, and I first say, hey, is my regular expression just a finite set of strings like this? If this is my regular expression, then, well, I'm going to build some quick DFA that accepts those strings. And I don't know, maybe we didn't spend time doing it, but you can build for any finite set of strings. It's not hard to build a DFA that accepts them, right? So we build this DFA, right? And we return that DFA, right? Everybody buy that? Now, suppose I'm given a regular expression that, if you study it, is some regular expression, the intersection with some other regular expression, right? Here's some example. Suppose this was my input. Well, I have to know order, the importance of things, and that will tell me that the intersection is the last thing that's done, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get help from my friends. I'm going to give R1 to my first friend, who's going to give me a DFA. I'm going to give R2 to my second friend, who's going to give me a DFA, right? And so now I don't micromanage my friends. I just trust that they're going to do what they promised to do, right? So I now have in my hand two DFAs, right? And I want to compute, I want to find a DFA that does union, right? So I look over here. Are DFAs closed under union? Yes, they are. So remember, we put the one DFA up here and the other DFA here, and I built a rectangle of all the states, right? So I take these two DFAs and I build the DFA of the union. And then that's what I return, right? That's the algorithm. Everybody follow that? Right? If this is my regular expression, my friend gives me a DFA for that, friend gives me a DFA for that, I combine them to get a DFA for the union. Oh, for the intersection. That's intersection. Yeah, that one's intersection. All right. So now what happens if it's union? Well, we do the exact same thing for union, right? What happens if it's a complement? Well, I'm going to give, if my regular expression is a complement of something, then I ask my friend to build a DFA for the regular expression without the complement, right? And my friend will give it to me. And then how do I take the complement of a DFA? I just switch the accept states and the reject states, right? So I do that and I return that machine. Now, what happens if it's concatenation, right? So my regular expression is the concatenation of two things. So I get my friends, my first friend gives me a DFA for the first regular expression. My second friend gives me a DFA for the second expression. And then what do? Well, I have to take these two machines and build the DFA for the machine, right? But do I know how to do that? Look over here. Do I know how to do that? No, I don't know how to do that, right? So instead, we're going to say, oh, look it. If they're in a phase, I would know how to do it, right? So what I do is I take my two DFAs. I can pretend that they're in a phase because every DFA is an NFA, right? And I do the concatenation of these two NFAs, and I get an NFA, right? So everybody see how we did that? Now I have an NFA that does this regular expression. But am I done? No, I'm not done because I'm promising to return a DFA. And what I have is an NFA, right? But we talked about how to convert NFAs into DFAs. So I take this NFA that this guy gave me and I convert it into a DFA and then I return that DFA. Right? Does that make sense? And here's another, same with star, right? If my regular expression is something star, then I get my friend to give me a DFA for it. And then when I do the star operation, right? Remember, it has epsilons going back from the finish state, accept state to the start state. So when I do this conversion, I get an NFA. And then I convert this NFA into a DFA. And I'm done, right? And that shows us that all of these things are the same. And it shows us that all of these things are closed. Does that make sense? How are you guys doing?
Yeah, everything's good. But so when you mean concatenate the machines, you basically mean attaching the machines through lines to each other, just attach them together.
I have this machine, I have this machine. I take an epsilon transition that goes from every start of one, from every accept of one to the start of the other.
Okay, and because epsilon is nothing, it doesn't really accept anything in that state. It's just to go to the machine. Okay.
The reason we have the epsilon is so that the machine commits. When it goes over to the second machine, it can never come back again.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right. I think we've more or less covered all of these topics.
Jeff,
Everybody good with these topics?
A question about the algorithm there where you're converting between the models.
Yeah.
For the runtime of this, would it be like exponential? Because when we convert from like a NFA to a DFA, it takes like you have to get 2 to the C states.
Everything blows up. Things blow up to be exponentially big. I mean, the one question is how big will the answer be? And sometimes we'll more than once we'll blow it up exponentially. So if you go exponential and then you go exponential, then that's double exponential. But I don't think it ever goes up. I don't have an answer for that, but I think going from a regular expression to a DFA can blow up exponentially, but I don't think it'll blow up exponentially. So, but I don't have a proof for that.
Gotcha.
But it's a good, I certainly thought about that, and I don't have an answer.
Thank you, though.
All right. Everybody good with that?